Welcome, everyone, to our same-day registration briefing for the March 5th, 2024 Democratic and Republican presidential primary elections. Thank you so much to all of you for being an SDR specialist, chief, or assistant chief in this election. During today's briefing, we're going to go over some of the information that might be helpful to remind you about as we head into the election. We have a number of staff for this briefing. I'll let them introduce themselves. Cheryl, would you like to start?
You are muted, Cheryl.
Sorry, we'll try that again. I'm Cheryl Jones. And to echo what Ravi said, we're really pleased you're taking on this important job as a provisional specialist or SDR specialist. What really hurts us here in the office is to have to deny someone their vote because a mistake was made by an election officer in the precinct. So we're doing all we can to reduce these or eliminate these mistakes. And that's why this training is really important, and why it's really important for you to be sure to review these steps and check your manual and give us a call if you have a problem. But thanks again for taking on this important job.
Thank you, Cheryl. Bushra Ardalan is our voter services and SDR manager. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bushra Ardalan. I am Voter Services SDR Manager. As Cheryl and Ravi mentioned, thank you for all hard work that you do. We are here on Election Day to answer any question or concern that you have. And today we are going through this briefing. Please write down your question and concern. We will be more than happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Bushra. Gretchen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gretchen Coleman. I'm the Election Officer Manager here. And I just want to thank you all again for serving in this important capacity, and I look forward to working with you on Election Day.
Sean?
Hey everyone, Sean Rogers. I'm our Training and Operations Manager. Looking forward to this briefing. Hope you get out of it what you're hoping to get, and hope you feel confident going into Election Day.
Thank you, Sean. And Jean?
Hi, I'm Jean Tenson. I work with Sean, and I'll be managing the questions and answers for this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. As you can see, we have a great and committed team to help support you through the SDR process before and on Election Day. So before we get into things, we want to start with a quick question for all of you. So Gretchen's going to turn on a poll that you can answer on your screen. And this is a good practice because we're going to have a number of these later on as we walk through certain situations. So go ahead and answer the question on your screen, which is, before this election, have you ever helped a voter with a same-day registration? We just want to get a sense of who's in the room and how much practice and experience you have with this. I can see we've got more than 150 people in the room, and almost all of you have now answered this question. And so it looks like about 70% of you have done same-day registrations with a voter before, whether as a chief, assistant chief, or SDR specialist. And about 30% of you, it sounds like it'll be your first time helping in this capacity. So with that in mind, we're going to certainly go through the basic overview information you need to know, as well as walking you through some of those practice situations to help you feel more confident. In terms of our agenda for today, first, Gretchen's going to go over an overview of the SDR process, including the process and procedures at your precinct, when you issue an SDR, how you determine the eligibility, and some tools and resources to help you in that process. For the second half, we're going to go to Sean to take you through step-by-step for the SDR process from start to finish, including 6 examples and practice scenarios, for which we're going to do interactive question and answer, just like we just did. And then at the end, we're going to take all of your questions. So if you do have any questions as we're going along, feel free to add them using the question and answer function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So again, just look at the bottom of your screen for a function called Q&A, and feel free to submit any questions anytime during this briefing. And then we'll be happy to answer them at the end of this briefing. Gretchen?
Thanks, Ravi. Like Ravi mentioned, I'll just be going through a brief overview of what the same-day registration process looks like. And as I go through this, please don't feel like you have to memorize every single detail. I'm really just highlighting the tools so you know where to go to get started. And we have instructions to help you out every step of the way. And then we'll get into more of the specifics later. So this is just kind of the overview of what the process looks like more broadly. But before we jump into that, I just want to give a quick reminder that this upcoming election on March 5th is a dual party primary. And so what that means is we're running a Democratic primary and a Republican primary at the same time. So voters will be voting either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot, and that affects some of the different procedures we do with the SDR process because you've got to note which election that they participated in. So I'll get more into some of the specifics for a dual party primary in just a moment. But to take a step back, just thinking about same-day registration more broadly, it's important to remember that this is a provisional process. So this means that they follow the same, a similar provisional checklist to all the other kinds of provisional ballots. That also means the ballot is set aside on election day, so it's adjudicated after the voter registration is processed and completed correctly. And when that happens, then and only then is the ballot counted. So who can do a same-day registration? We'll get into a lot of the specifics, but more broadly, any person who is qualified to register to vote can complete a same-day registration in the precinct where they are currently residing. So this could be a first-time voter, someone who has never been registered before, or this could be someone who has recently moved into their new precinct and has not updated their registration since. And if you're already feeling a little hesitation, no worries. The main thing that I want you to take away from this briefing is that if you're ever unsure about anything related to same-day registration, we are here to support you. So anytime between now through election day, if you have any questions or want some clarification, please don't hesitate to give the office a call. So this could be if you have questions about some of the general procedures about how to process same-day registration and help a voter fill out the envelope, you could call the general support line and we're here to help you. But if you have any questions about specific voters or need kind of research about whether a voter is eligible, particular questions about SDR, then we have a voter registration line who are the experts in this, who do this every day, and they're thrilled to be able to help you out. So these numbers are going to be located in your Chief's notebook and on the SDR guide, so please check them out and give us a call if anything comes up. Okay, so now we'll get more into the basics of SDR. So at its core, there's two big components to the SDR process. The first is to determine if a voter is eligible to complete a same-day registration in your precinct, and the second part is actually helping the voter fill out the provisional envelope and complete their SDR ballot. So to start, the voter's eligibility for same-day registration. So the first step would be to search for the voter's name in the poll book, like you would with any other voter. And then two main options could come up from here. So to start, if the voter is not in the poll book, but they do live in your precinct, they are eligible to do an SDR. Then you can go ahead and move to the provisional part of the process, filling out the envelope. Alternatively, if they are listed in the poll book, take note of their precinct number and name, and you'll end up using that later. The second step is to use the My Neighborhood tool, which is located on your admin tablet, to determine the precinct where the voter currently lives. I'll get more into how you do that in just a moment. After you find out the precinct, then you need to find out the congressional district in which they live, and we have a handy tool called the Precinct Locator, which is also on the admin tablet to help you do that. And then finally, once you have all of that information put together, we use the moving conditions chart to determine where the voter is eligible to vote. Okay, so now to break that down. So the first step, we had already looked in the poll book, and if they are listed in the poll book, or if they're not listed in the poll book, excuse me, then you don't need to take these steps 2, 3, 4. This is in the circumstance where the voter is listed in the poll book, and they do live in your precinct. So then you would go over to the My Neighborhood app on the admin tablet. So you can find that in the upper right corner. And the MN stands for My Neighborhood. And then once you tap on that, this will bring you to a page where you can search the voter's address up here. And then that will pull up the voting precinct on the left-hand column of this app. You can find the precinct pretty easily that way. The step after that would be to go into the precinct locator, which is also found on the admin tablet. It's that little PCT icon on your admin tablet. We also have a paper copy if that's easier for you, or for whatever reason your admin tablet is not working. Then you would go see on the left-hand side, you can find the precinct, and then the associated congressional district will be that first column labeled the CONG for congressional district. And so that'll be the easiest way to find the congressional district where the voter currently lives. And so as you do this, it might be helpful to just take note, write down in a scratch sheet of paper, all of this information so you have it handy for step 4, which is the moving conditions. And so we have a couple of different tools to use, and I'll show you each of them in a moment. You'll be able to get practice using both. But essentially, you're just trying to figure out two things: how far away the voter moved. So if they moved within your precinct or in a couple of different areas across the state of Virginia, and when and at what point they moved. And the different dates are listed here. And we'll walk you through how you can use this chart to figure out the different conditions in just a moment. But the one thing that I do want to highlight with this chart is that some voters may have multiple options. So you can see kind of in the middle of this grid, there are some voters who would have the option of either being eligible to vote routinely in their old precinct before they moved, or vote and complete the same-day registration process in their new precinct. And so you would present this choice to voters, and it would be up to them to decide what they want to do on Election Day. So this is just the exact same information, just another way of presenting this information. So before we had the grid. Some people prefer a flow chart like this, just to kind of walk you through the steps in a more linear fashion. And so which one you use is completely up to you. It's the same information. I personally am a fan of the flow chart because that's how my mind works, but some people find the grid really easy to navigate. So I encourage you to practice using both, so on Election Day you can find which works best for you. And so I know I just threw a ton of information at you, but I do want to emphasize you don't need to memorize all of it. So this is a checklist that walks through all of the steps that I just said, and it'll be located in the Chief's notebook, as well as we'll have a separate handout guide that will be available to the SDR specialists on Election Day. So to reiterate, if you're trying to decide if a voter is eligible to do same-day registration in your precinct, then you would pull up this guide and follow the steps. And we will get some more practice in that in just a moment, the second half of this briefing. Okay, so let's assume that we've decided that a voter is eligible to do a same-day registration in your precinct, and you want to proceed with the SDR process. Then to do that, you help them fill out the correct side of the provisional envelope. And so before we do that, I really want to emphasize something. The other main takeaway, if nothing else today, is that provisional voters must never cast their ballot in the DS-200. Instead, they seal it in this envelope, which allows us to set it aside in the appropriate number 1A envelope, which I'll get into in just a moment as well. So as they fill out this envelope, they put their ballot in, they seal the envelope, and that is how they are able to cast their vote on Election Day. And so you can see that there are two sides to this envelope. Same-day registration voters only fill out one side of the provisional envelope. That's the one here on the left-hand side, the Virginia provisional vote and same-day registration application you can see listed at the top. The other side of the envelope is for non-same-day registration provisionals. So that would be for all other kinds of provisional voting, but for a same-day registration, the focus of this briefing, always fill out the envelope on the left-hand side. I want to emphasize it's really important to be able to get all of that, to fill out the correct side of the envelope for every single voter. And one more thing about this, I'll kind of highlight some main sections to keep in mind for this, but it is really important. We have another checklist to follow to make sure you hit every single step and fill out every required field to make sure that voters' registration is able to be processed and their ballot is able to be counted. So there are a couple of things to keep in mind about filling out the provisional envelope specific to a dual party primary like the one that we're in now. And that is to write the precinct and the party in the upper right corner of the provisional envelope. For the party, just write D or R based on if it's a Democratic or Republican ballot, and then just write the precinct which you're located. This is important because we're going to ultimately separate separate all of the provisional ballots based on party at the end, and the ballot's sealed in there. So once you seal it, you won't be able to go check and remember what you had issued to the voter. And so after you fill out the paper part of the provisional envelope, you're going to go enter all of that same information into the provisional log on the admin tablet, which allows us to track all of the provisional ballots that come in. And so you can find that on the left-hand side of the top corner of the admin tablet. And so once you have all that information, you can just copy it right over from the paper envelope into the provisional ballot log. The other thing that is critical to remember for this is with a dual party primary, you do have to select which ballot that they took. But that's okay because you've already written the party initial in the upper right-hand corner of the envelope, so it's easy to just copy that over into the provisional log. And so once you have completed every step of you filled out the envelope, you've put it in the provisional ballot log, the voter sealed their ballot in, you're good to go. Then you would place that final sealed provisional envelope with the ballot inside in the appropriate number 1A envelopes. These are a lot bigger and they would contain all of the different provisional envelopes voted that day. And so we have 4 provisional envelopes because it depends on which party they voted in. So if they voted in a Democratic or a Republican primary, and if they completed an SDR or a non-SDR envelope. So for example, if a Democratic voter voted an SDR ballot, that would be the one in the top left corner. If a voter voted in the Republican primary and filled out a non-SDR provisional ballot, that would be in the bottom right corner that says Republican and does not have the SDR label listed. So just as it's really important to make sure you write the appropriate party at the top, it is critical to put the provisional envelope in the correct number 1A envelope. At the end of the provisional process, you will give a voter this provisional notice, which is essentially just a little take home to provide some more information about kind of what the provisional process looks like, give some more explanation for what may happen with their ballot. And for this process, you would always check that they completed the same day registration, just to give them some more context for why their vote was cast in this way. So again, I know I've provided a lot of different information at you, but we have a checklist to make this really easy for you on election day. So as long as you follow all of these steps, this will make sure you filled out every required fields, you've filled out the provisional ballot log, and the voter's done everything they need to do, then they will be good to go for a voter to vote an SDR provisional ballot. And to reiterate, you're always welcome to call our office for help if you are unsure. We can talk you through the checklist and make sure you filled out all the required steps so you're good to go, and the voter is good to go on election day. So this was kind of a broad overview of what the SDR process looks like, but now we will break it down step by step to make sure that you're comfortable with every step of the process. And so for that, I will turn it over to Sean.
Thanks, Gretchen. Thanks for that overview there. For this next section, we're going to be jumping into an example and going through some addresses and going through the tools and seeing how you would make that decision, the way that you would decide when or when not to issue the same day registration, or just generally how to determine the voter's option. So jumping into it, for this example, we're going to imagine that you are the chief at precinct 132 Monument, which is in the 11th Congressional District. The voter that you're working with tells you that they live at that address, 4233 Monument Wall Way. And when you go to look them up, you find them on your poll pad registered at this address on Arlington Boulevard in Falls Church. And additionally, the voters told you that they moved from their old address to that new address on Monument Wall Way in 2022. So the first thing we want to do is find out if the voter is in your precinct in the first place. So for that, you're going to want to turn to My Neighborhood. Again, you have that on your admin tablet. We're going to go into that app and we're going to enter the voter's address. So you can see here, there's a little screenshot of the app. We have entered that voter's address that they say they currently live at. And when we look over there in the sidebar, we see that they are at the right voting precinct, Monument 132. And hey, that's your precinct. So we already know that they're in the right precinct for where they live. But the question is, they've moved. So what are their options? We also have to find out where they moved from. So we're going to take that other address that they gave you, their 7235 Arlington Boulevard address, which they said was their prior address that they moved from. And we see that that is at precinct number 525. So noting down that info, we have 132 and 525. They moved from 525 to 132. So now we just have to find out the congressional district information for these precincts. So for that, we're going to use the precinct locator. As you saw before, it's on your admin tablet as well, the tile right below there. If you open that up and you go down to the precincts, we know that we had 132 Monument, that's your precinct in the 11th Congressional District for their current address. But we find that with their prior address on Arlington Boulevard in 525, that is in the 8th Congressional District. So now we have more or less all the information that we need to help this voter make their determination for their voting options. They've moved from congressional districts within Fairfax County, and we know when they moved. As a reminder, they said that they moved on October 2nd of 2022. So we'll determine what this voter's options are. We're going to go through both of those tools that we showed you earlier. There's the grid, and then we'll show the flow chart. Firstly, with the grid, we need to follow along the top and the left. We have to ask ourselves, how far did the voter move and when did the voter move? So going with that first question, we know that the voter moved to a different congressional district within Virginia. So we know We followed along there, and then going down, we know that they moved in 2022, which is that third column, and we've arrived at this tile. So the voter's option here is to do a same-day registration in the precinct where they live, and they live in your precinct. So this voter, you would issue an SDR and have them proceed with that process. So that's how we decided, that's how we got the information for where we land in this grid and how we get down to the last, to the voter's option. We'll also take a look at using the flowchart to make the same determination. Again, this is the same information, but if this is what you prefer to use to help work through these, that is fine. So the first question is the voter currently registered in Virginia? And we know that we found them registered in Fairfax County at the old address. They never updated their address. So the answer is yes. And have they moved? Also yes, they now live in your precincts. So it was within Fairfax County. They moved from their address in Walnut Hill to Monument between those two precincts. And how far was that move? It was within Fairfax County, but to a different congressional district. And finally, the last piece of information, when was that move? That gets us to the voter's option. Because it was on or before November 7th, 2023, they do a same-day registration in the precinct where they now live, which again is your precinct in this example. So that is walking through step-by-step kind of the thought process you would use to work through what information the voter has with respect to their address when they moved, and then help them arrive there at the bottom, what their voting option is going to be there today on March 5th. So after that, we proceed with the rest of the process. So the voter fills out their envelope. Here's just an example of a completed envelope. We've cut out the middle section there and just kept the required sections. As you can see in the top right, we've also written, for example, this voter, the voter's party primary that they've chosen to vote in, but otherwise they'll proceed to fill out the same-day registration envelope. You'll fill out your section in the bottom left in section down there that says election officer. And then you'll proceed with the rest of the steps that Gretchen mentioned earlier. You'll fill out your provisional log with this information, and you'll give the voter their provisional notice, giving them more information about what voting provisionally means. So with that out of the way, or with that having gone through that, we will jump into 6 practice problems, which are going to be done through some interactive polls here. We're going to present you information similar to what we just went through there, give you a minute or so to think about what options you can work through for this voter, and then have you answer that question. So going into practice problem number 1. For this example, and for these problems, we've given you the flow chart so you can get used to using that, and so you have that on your screen. In this scenario, we have that the voter is not on your poll pad, and you've already made the determination that they live in your precinct. So knowing that information and seeing the grid that you have here, they are not registered in Fairfax County or in Virginia. So knowing that, what is their option? You've determined that they live in your precinct and they're not registered to vote. So we'll give you a minute or so there to let answers come in for that. So we
Sean,
see a
I'm
lot
loving, sorry, I was just saying, I'm loving
go
that
ahead.
almost everyone's getting this one right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to mention. Is I'm seeing the answers coming through. It looks like most people have answered now, and the right answer there for this voter, their voting option is to vote, or we'll go ahead and give it a couple more seconds for that poll to go through. Yeah, so the answer for this one was that the voter can vote an SDR in your precinct. That's how we followed the flow chart, and that's how we got to where we were. So that one's pretty straightforward. We'll jump into one that's maybe a little bit more going on. So for practice problem number 2, this voter, again, we've determined we're skipping past the part where we use our tools to find out where the voter lives in the congressional districts. We're jumping, to the point where we make the decision through the flowchart or the grid. So for this voter, we've determined that they live in your precinct, but we see that they are registered. Sorry, you find them on your poll pad registered in another precinct in Fairfax County, and it's in the same congressional district. There's no change there. And finally, they told you that they moved from that address into your precinct on January 24th of 2021. So this voter may have a couple of options. Following through on this list, go ahead and using this flowchart and using that information, go ahead and see what you would give for this voter starting at the top. Are they currently registered? And then going down through knowing what they've told you. So we'll give you a minute or so to work through these. It's important to consider that information between how far have they moved and whether or not it was between congressional districts and when that was, because the interplay between those two will help come up with their options. And again, remember, I guess I should also mention that for this practice problem number 2 and going forward, these are actually multiple answers. So this voter may have multiple options, and if that's the case, you can select any that apply to them for what their voting options could be. So we've got answers coming in here. About 2/3 of you or so have gone through this. Give it a couple more seconds if you want to take a stab at it. It looks like and if you have the poll in front of your screen and the flow chart is behind it, you may want to move the poll off to the side of your screen if you're able to do that. If it has popped up in your screen and it's blocking the flow chart, see if you can drag that over to another spot. But I'm seeing the results here. We'll go ahead and give you the answer for this one, which was that this voter, they are currently registered in Virginia. Yes, they have moved. Yes, it was within Fairfax County. We're going on to the left there. They've moved within the same congressional district, but to a different precinct. So this voter's options are to vote a same-day registration in your precinct, which is where they live, or the voter is able to sign an affirmation of eligibility and vote in their registered precinct, which for this voter would be that old precinct. So the voter has both options. They can do an SDR there in front of you, or if they wish, they are definitely able to go back to their other precinct and sign that affirmation. The voter gets both options. So it looks like we have a lot of people, a little bit less, looks like most of you got that answer, and that one was a little bit more involved.
Excuse me, Sean, can I add something here?
Please go ahead, Bushra.
Yeah, if we send the voter to the registered precinct and the other precinct provide them with affirmation of eligibility, the address on affirmation should be the new address, not the address that they are registered with, okay? This is very important on affirmation. Only on this will apply to provide their new address, okay?
Thanks for mentioning that, Bushra. And that goes the same way too. If a voter has come to your precinct and let's say you're at that other precinct and the voter has come and they are eligible to fill out the affirmation and vote on machine in your precinct, they'll be filling out their new address. So we'll go ahead and go on to practice problem number 3 here, if that makes sense to everyone there. For this one, similar situation, the voter, we're going to do that reverse situation that I was just kind of alluding to. The voter is registered at their old address, and that address is in your precinct. The voter, though, tells you that they now live in another precinct, and that precinct you've determined is in a different congressional district. So the voters come into your precinct, which was where they are registered to vote, but they're telling you that I moved out of this precinct on February 12th of 2024 this year, just a few weeks ago. So the voter's new address is not your precinct, it's another precinct, and you've already determined that it's a different congressional district. So again, this voter may have multiple options depending on that combination of information. They've moved out of your precinct, but they've showed up to your precinct, and that's where they're standing right now. So again, go ahead and take a look at this flow chart and see what options you would provide for this voter. We'll give you a minute or so to take a look and work through this one. And if you're not sure or you're unsure, that's fine. That's why we're here, is to work through some of these and help you kind of get used to the way to work through these problems, get used to the thought process for how to arrive at the way that we're going to be helping out these voters. So again, we're at about 2/3 or so having gone through this one. We'll give you a couple more seconds if you want to get your answer in on this poll. But I think at this point, yeah, we're good about. Most of you have put in an answer here, so we'll go ahead and show you what the result, what the correct determination was for this one. If you go ahead and think about it for this voter, is the voter currently registered in Virginia? Yes, they are. And have they moved? Yes, they have. So this voter's options would be to either A or D, vote routinely in your precinct, or go to their new precinct and vote a same-day registration. They have both options. We'll have them. Yeah, go ahead.
After you, Sean.
I was gonna say, we want to make sure that we get their new address no matter what.
Yes.
But these are their voting options for that day. So if you follow through the chart there, they have moved. It was within Fairfax County, and it was to a different congressional district. So we're following along down to the bottom, but it was a very recent move. It was just a few weeks ago. So they can vote where registered, which is your precinct, or if they wish, they can go to their new precinct and vote provisionally with a same-day registration. But if they are in your precinct, we also want to make sure that we get their address updated. Bushra, is that something that you want to mention?
Yeah, it's the same thing that if you let the voter to vote in your precinct, offer them voter registration application to update their new address, and that application goes to envelope number 8.
Thank you, Bushra. So it looks like a lot of you guys got that one. A lot of you all got that one right. Just remember, it can get a little bit tricky when you think about what's your precinct, what's the old precinct, and which direction has the voter gone. But if you get all that information ahead of time, have it, as Gretchen mentioned, maybe write down, old address is this congressional district, new address is this congressional district. We'll get to the right options to provide to that voter. So with those practice problems out of the way, those are the examples that we had for you for how to think through what options for the move rules specifically. The next 3 that we have for you are examples of the provisional ballot envelope that the voter is completing their same-day registration application. We'll take a look at the way that those are completed, and imagine that one of those voters from a recent example has now sat down at your table and completed the envelope. We've only shown the top section here just so it's a little bit easier to see. But for this envelope, what you want to take a look at is what's missing or what's wrong. So there are several required sections that the voter has to complete, and you're going to take a look at it and review it and make sure that it's filled out completely. So this is an example of seeing what's missing or what might not be correct. So imagine Joe voter has turned around or has given you back this provisional ballot envelope. We'll give you a poll here for this one. So taking a look at this, and again, there might be more than one answer, so that you can select as many as apply, whatever number that might be. So what do you see that's missing just on these sections 1 through 3? We'll give you guys a minute or so to take a look at this, see what jumps out to you, work through it. Remember what is there with an asterisk, and thinking back to what Gretchen mentioned earlier about filling out that envelope.
Sean, do we want to give everyone a hint and tell them how many things there might be? Or is that going to make it too easy for everyone?
Let's see how we do on this one, and we'll jump into the next one.
Okay.
Because it could be 0, it could be 4, it could be any number in between.
Let me just add that many of you might want to look a little bit more carefully.
I'll tell you that it's definitely more than 0. So it looks like we have about 75% of everyone has answered this question. So looking at this envelope, we'll go ahead and show you what was missing. As you can see, The address is fully completed, but there are 3 missing things. 1, we've not written down what precinct we're in the top right. That's for us to write down. 2, the question number 3 about whether or not their rights have been revoked due to felony or adjudication of mental incapacity, that was not answered by the voter. And 3, they have written today's date or the date of the election for their date of birth instead of writing their actual date of birth, which is very probably information going in the wrong place. So that was those are the 3. There's an incomplete date of birth, missing precinct, and missing answer to question number 3. So we'll give you another one of these. Practice problem number 5 here. Same thing, different voter, different set of circumstances here. So take another look at this one. I will give you a hint for this one. It is also 3 things that you'll want to take a look at. So you have the options here down at the bottom and on your poll here, and you're looking for 3 of those. I'll take Ravi's suggestion here and let you know how many you're looking out for. So I'll give you a couple moments here to take a look at what you're seeing here and then see what's missing, what's not right, and go ahead and answer that poll. So we're seeing the answers coming through. It looks like about 2/3 of you, quickly rising, about 3/4 of you have answered this question. Feel free to take a second to get that answer in. But we'll go ahead and tell you the answer. Yeah, it looks like almost everyone's responded. For this envelope, what's missing is 3 things. And that is 1, they didn't write their full social security number. As you can see there, they only put the last 4. 2, they are missing or they have incomplete information for their address. They didn't fill out those 2 required sections with the asterisk next to them. And number 3, they have a missing or incomplete answer to question number 3. They have checked yes, that they have checked yes to that question, but as you can see below there, it says if yes, has your right to vote been restored? The voter has left that blank. So if they check no, that would be the end of it. But if they had checked yes, there's an additional section to complete. So looking at the results here, it looks like most of you got that one right. It is those 3 things, and we've got everything else here. They've left off the email and phone number, but as you can see, those are very nice to have if the voter completes them, but it is not one of those asterisk sections. And then I believe we have one more for you. One more practice problem number 6. On this one, we're also including the bottom section. I hope that doesn't bias the answer here, but when you look at this envelope, we've cut out sections 4 through 6 because it's additional information that doesn't apply to every voter. But for this envelope, the voter has completed this one, and you see this. So go ahead and take a second to, we're going to do one more poll for what is missing on this envelope. And again, just like all the prior ones, this is it may have multiple answers. I won't tell you how many are on this one. Just try to make it a little bit harder, or maybe a little bit more of an exercise. So we've got about 60% of you having answered. Give you a couple more seconds to take a look at this one and get your answer in there. A lot of answers coming in. If you're not sure, that's fine. We'll give you the answer in just a second here. All right, so seeing a lot of responses here. It looks like most of you, again, got this one too. When you look at what is missing on this envelope or incomplete on this envelope, we see that we have three things. One is that the voter has missed the checkbox at the top for the citizenship question. They did not answer that. Additionally, they did not sign this application. Down in section 7, which is the voter's place to sign on the envelope, it is blank. The voter did not sign it. And 3, also, the election officer has not completed their section. So there's still some more work to be done on this one. That section was also left blank. Everything else above it, they have their answers to the other questions in section 1, in section 2, and section 3, just not those, their citizenship answer, their signature, and the election officer portion. And so it looks like most of you all got that one right too. And that was the last practice problem we had for you. We had 3 that were thinking through the moving conditions and 3 that were looking at the envelope, which are 2 major points for when you're working through a same-day registration. Now I think we're going to take a step back and look at, or I'll turn it on over to Ravi to talk a little bit about what our metrics were previously.
Thanks, Sean. And before we do that, I'm so glad that all of you are with us here today and had a chance to practice some of those situations. If you didn't get the answers correctly, or if you didn't feel confident about your answer, just a reminder, you can always call us in the office on election day. We would much rather get a call from you to help you walk you through the situation than for you to handle it wrong on election day. And the other reminder I'll give you is that we're conducting some open houses this week. So if you're a chief or assistant chief, we have an open house tomorrow, and we'll have an SDR station set up there. And if you're an SDR specialist, we have an open house on Thursday that's open to all election officers. By all means, please come in and practice these with us. We saw some questions from some of you about how many provisionals we had in the last election. So I just want to show you this chart of how many total provisionals that we had. So we had about 4,100 provisionals submitted in the November 2023 election, of which you can see about 56% were SDRs. So that's why we want to kind of go through this briefing today and remind you about some of these situations. About 42% of all submitted provisionals were for voters who had requested an absentee ballot but did not have one with them to surrender. So as you can see, those 2 situations are by far the most common provisional situations. And then it adds up to less than 2% for all the other situations, which includes if a voter is shown in the poll book as having already voted, usually there's some type of checking error happening there. If someone doesn't have an acceptable ID, remember that we have an ID confirmation statement. It's something that the state law allows for. A voter who doesn't have an ID can do that. They don't always have to do a provisional. And then just some other situations that arise. Of these, about 4,100 total provisionals, about 5% of the provisionals were not able to be accepted by the Electoral Board last election. That may not seem like a big number, but that's about 200 provisional voters whose ballots couldn't be accepted. And we want to really stress that's very, very important for all of you to follow the procedures correctly. Excuse me, because we never want to take a chance of disenfranchising a voter if they're otherwise eligible and able to vote. All right, now let's check in with Bushra and Cheryl to see if they have any updates. So Bushra, as a reminder, is our voter services and same-day registration manager. She and her team are the folks that will be receiving all of your provisional ballots after Election Day and researching them. And Bushra, I know you chimed in on a few things here. Is there anything else you want everyone to remember or common mistakes you want them to avoid?
So I saw the presentation and slideshow was pretty much cover everything. I can just mention a couple mistakes that happened previous election, November election, and I can mention some of them in order to avoid those mistakes to be written. One, like what we have, SDR was submitted in wrong precinct, as Sean and Gretchen mentioned in this slideshow. That is very important. The SDR should be completed in the precinct where they reside. That's one part. The other one was the incomplete application, and we covered that part to that question number 3. Either it was blank or wrong box was checked. So please double check the application, review it after the voter filling out the application, because as you know, SDR is 2-part, registration and the provisional ballot. For registration to be accepted, it must be completed application. All required information should be completed. So whenever voter fill out the application, please review it and go through your checklist to see if anything is missing. Other thing that we We find out last election was wrong side of the envelope was filled out. For SDR, we had non-SDR side was filled out by voters. So we need to avoid it for this election. SDR side is need to be completed. There are some other things that happened that we found SDR in envelope number 8. That should not be happen. SDR should goes to envelope 1A SDRs. Envelope number 8, as I think is chief, not SDR special, so I don't want to cover that. And the other thing, no ID box, the ID box wasn't checked. So that's important to check. The reason is SDR and check if it's ID provided, because for voting, they cannot vote if it's no ID was provided or they did not fill out the ID confirmation statement. And the other thing that I should mention is that I think sometimes SDR and affirmation was filled out. If the voters submitted SDR, they don't need to fill out an affirmation of eligibility. So please make sure those to avoid those mistakes. And thank you. And if you have any question, we are open for your question.
Thank you so much, Bushra. Cheryl, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I have a couple of things, and thanks for the presentation. It was great training. I know it's an awful lot of information for everyone who is listening, but you've got it all.
Cheryl, you are muted.
Cheryl, I think I accidentally muted you. I apologize.
Yes.
And if you also want to bring your microphone up a little bit.
Thank you, Ravi. I can take a hint.
Sorry.
Let me start again. I think it was the presentation was really well done, and I know there's an awful lot of information, and you received it like a fire hose. But it's all in your manual. It's all in the checklists. This is just to give you an overview. Now go back and read it the day before the election to remind you. A couple of things to mention. One is if the voter is in your precinct, sorry, back up. If the voter is in your poll book, they have an address there, and that's where they used to live, but now they've moved to another precinct. They can vote in your precinct. They don't need to fill out a SDR. They don't need to vote provisionally. They're in your poll book. I mean, this is if they're within the move voter rules. Let's say they're within the move voter rules. We received applications. I mean, we received SDRs from people who were in the right precinct. Remember, one of the instructions is if the voter is moved and they're within the move voter rules, they can go back to their original precinct. So now they've come back to your precinct and they're there. Just give them a regular application to update their voter registration, and we'll do that after the election. So if they're on your poll book, you just need to check and see if they're within the move voter rules, and they can vote normally. But tell them they need to update their address for their new residents. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but we did get SDRs where there was no reason to do an SDR because the person was voting in the precinct where they're registered. The other one, someone asked a question about how many SDRs we received and so forth. So I've got some numbers for you. As Ravi said, well, we had 2,313 SDRs last November. 121 were not accepted. That's the 5%, Ravi said. And you're thinking, why? What could go wrong with so many? 7, believe it or not, 7 didn't even reside in Fairfax County. The SDR was given to people who aren't even in the county. So be very careful. You say, well, where could they reside? They were in Fairfax City. They were in Loudoun. They were in Prince William. The other were staff errors, 13 of them we marked as staff errors. And you think, well, what could be a staff error? Guess what? The envelope was empty because the voter put their ballot in the DS200. Ballots don't go in the DS200s. Don't let that voter get out of your sight. They stay at the chief's table until they finish their ballot and put it in that envelope. Don't let them get up and wander away because you got distracted. And then 49 of the 121 were in the wrong precinct. They didn't even live in the precinct where the SDR was completed. And some chiefs gave multiple people SDRs, and they were all in different precincts, random precincts. So please be careful, follow your checklists. We hate it when people who should have been allowed to vote or not allowed to vote. And then two, consider that you're wasting your time if you're filling out an SDR for someone who doesn't even live in the county. And keep an eye and make sure we eliminate the number of ballots that go into the DS200. And I think that's all I can think of right off, but we'll answer your questions. Any other questions?
So I know we've got a number of questions using the Q&A function. I know Jean and I and Cheryl have been answering a number of them. Excuse me, Jean, do you have any specific questions you'd like to direct at anyone?
I certainly do. One of the most popular questions has been, what do we do if there's a mistake made filling out the green envelope? Can we cross out information? Do we spoil the thing and put it in an envelope? Which one? Just how do we handle mistakes?
Yeah, you can just, if it's a simple mistake, they've put the wrong town or the wrong zip code, or they've put 2024 as their birth date, just put a couple lines through it and have them write the correct one. But the voter needs to complete their form. I mean, unless the assistance form and so forth, but you can't do it. You can't do it after the voter leaves. Say, oh, look, gosh, look, they they put down the wrong city or something. You don't correct it. The voter can correct it. That's not a problem.
Let me follow up on that. You said the voter needs to do that. Should you always tell them to line through the information? Because naturally people will try to like write over things and it might be hard to read.
Whatever makes it the easiest to read. We have to be able to see the numbers. We have to be able to read what's been written. So you can put a line through it.
Or
Right,
yeah.
write the number above the box. That's fine. We're people here reviewing this.
Yeah, and if it's like like the envelope is messy and the vote is still in the precinct, give them a new envelope and spell the other one. It's just like before the voting, not after the voters just cast their ballot. So all option is open, but the important thing that the election officer will not write down on the envelope. It's the voter responsibility to fill up their application and their envelope.
Okay, I've got another question for Cheryl and or Bushra. Some people have asked, how do we ask the voter to show that they are a Virginia resident or indicate that they're a citizen? How do we make sure that that's true?
You can answer it, Cheryl. So can you repeat the question if I can answer? Okay, go ahead, ask the question again, please, Jane.
Sure. How do we make sure that a voter is a Virginia resident, and how do we make sure that they are a citizen?
So if they fill out the application and they sign that after all information is correct, we go by that. We do not request any approve unless they need to provide an ID for voting. But for registration, we will not ask any proof from the voter.
And Bushra, just to confirm, essentially what we do is we follow the procedures set in law and prescribed by the Virginia Department of Elections for how to handle that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, keep in mind, they're filling out a voter registration application the same way they would do if they came to our office any other time during the year, or if they picked one up at a library and completed it. It's the same application. All the rules are the same for accepting it or not.
That's great. What do we do if a voter can't remember when they moved? Ravi?
Maybe.
Yeah, most people know generally when they move. We don't need an exact date. Just try to get out of the month and the year. Certainly if it's in the last year, it doesn't really matter if it was April 4th or April 30th. because they're still going to be within the move voter rules.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is, and I understand that sometimes a voter may not remember the exact date, you can always offer them the 3 periods listed on the moving conditions grid or flow chart and ask them to narrow down between those. If they can't recall which one of those it is, then call the office for further guidance on that specific situation. But essentially, the voter needs to know which situation they would fall into.
Got a question for Sean. Are all the voters in Fairfax County in the poll pad?
Thanks, Gene. Yes, so the poll pad has all registered voters in Fairfax County, regardless of whether they're in your precinct or another precinct. But again, that's just Fairfax County. So if you look someone up and you find them on the poll pad, that is at least registered voters in Fairfax County as of election day and what we have for their information, or as of just before election day, I should say.
Back to Cheryl and or Bushra. Do we always use the voter's current address on the affirmation of eligibility?
Yes,
Yes.
but that depends. If the voter doing SDR and they were in, so for example, affirmation, that was the situation that we mentioned in that question, that the voter moved after 2021, they are eligible to do affirmation in the registered precinct, but affirmation need to have their current address. Sometimes we have inactive voter and they are eligible to vote in their old precinct when they said that, no, I did not move. So at that time, the affirmation, the address on affirmation will match the address that we have on the poll pad. That means, yes, all the time, the affirmation should have the current residence address for the voter.
That's great. Let's move on to acceptable IDs. For SDR and provisional voting, do we use the same acceptable ID chart that we use for normal voters?
Correct, right, Ravi? Correct, it's the same.
Right, yes. So for any voter that's checking in to vote, excuse me, you can always use the acceptable ID chart. The only exception to that in this year's elections will be if a voter is marked as a HAVA verify ID voter, in which case it would show that on the poll pad. But for SDR and provisional situations, that generally won't be applicable. So the short answer is yes, same ID chart for provisional voters as regular voters.
Great. Another one for you, Ravi. Is there anything special that we do for a curbside voter who is going to be doing an SDR or provisional ballot?
Great question. So the answer is we treat all voters the same way. So whether a voter chooses to vote inside the voting room or whether they're eligible and choose to vote by curbside, we handle them the same way. The only thing is, of course, if it's a curbside voter, it's going to require a little bit more work on your part as the SDR specialist or chief, because you'll have to be out there with the voter as they're marking that ballot. And then obviously when you take it inside, it would not be to scan it on the DS200. Good question.
We've had 2 or 3 people ask about what to do if the voter is refusing to provide their full social security number. We know that they have to because this is a voter registration application. Any techniques for kind of negotiating that conversation?
Cheryl, do you want to answer that first?
The law says they must require their full social security number. So if they don't want to supply it, then they can't register to vote. And I think all you can tell them as an election officer is simply that the law requires a full social security number. And there's a law book at every precinct in your kit. If they really want you to look it up and you have time, which you may for this election, we don't expect it to be terribly busy, you can find it, or you can look it up, you know, in advance and mark it so you know. They're still they can still fill out the application. You can't stop them from filling out an application, of course, but you can just tell them that the law requires a full social, and they say, well, I'm not going to do it, and then they can fill it out. But Bushra is going to send them a letter and say, sorry, we need your full social security number.
So the only exception for this one, there is only one if they are already registered voter in Virginia. But we don't want to confuse you with the SDR just tell everybody is required, the full social, because that is the best way to eliminate error and deny the application.
And the only thing I'll add to that is for any voter who is declined to provide some type of required information on election day or any other situation that you're not sure how to handle, by all means, call us on election day. Sometimes if it doesn't carry enough weight coming from you as the chief or the SDR specialist, let us be that messenger in between and help you out. That's what we're here to do.
Is there an SDR manual or a place where we can download this moving conditions grid and flow chart and the steps so that we can review this?
I can answer that one. So yes, there is all this information ready for you both on election day and now for you to review ahead of time if you choose to do so. So on election day, the chiefs and assistant chiefs will have the chief's notebook, and this is chapter 8 within that notebook. And the SDR specialists will have a separate handout that they can use with the exact same information on election day. Before then, if you go onto the election officer portal on the same page that you registered for the SDR briefing, we also have some documents posted there. So we have the same guide that everyone will receive on election day, as well as separate copies of the moving conditions, the chart, the grid, and the flow chart, so you can review those ahead of time. And so you're welcome to print those out, but like I said, we'll have printed copies ready for you on election day.
And Gretchen, just to confirm, the packet that SDR specialists will receive, that's going to be in the chief's final material, so they can give it to the SDR specialist either the day before the election or on election morning. And it is the exact same as what the chief is receiving. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the same information, just a separate handout. So you have that all ready for you to use as the SDR specialist on election day.
Okay. I want to go back to a question that I think we started with. And Cheryl, I just want to make sure we've got this correct. So I see a number of questions still coming in about how does the voter or the election officer correct an error if they make an error on the provisional envelope. So I know we told them one option is certainly just spoil that envelope and fill out a new one. If they want to fix it on there, could you just repeat the instructions for how to do so? If it's something minor?
Yeah, just scratch through it and write the correct one. For example, if they write 2024 for their birth year and you look at it and say, oh, wait, I don't think you were born this year, just scratch through it and write, their birth year 2000 above it. The numbers don't have to be inside the squares. That's good. Or if they write the wrong zip code, just put a couple of lines through it and write the correct one. If you're actually changing an address or something, someone wrote and said, should they initial it? It never hurts to initial it. Go ahead. The important thing is that they make the change, and that should be possible because you should be reviewing that envelope carefully before they ever leave the table.
And Cheryl, just to make sure we've got this right. So if a voter has made a mistake, let's say on the date of birth, is it the voter that makes that correction, or can the election officer make that correction?
No, the voter needs to make that correction.
Okay.
While
and
they're,
does the voter,
sitting there.
Which makes sense. And does the voter need to initial that they've made a change?
It doesn't hurt to initial it. Yeah, go ahead and initial it. Sometimes it's very obvious if it's the voter or because we've had chiefs or election officer make changes after the fact, and it's easy to see that it wasn't the voter. So it's always good to initial any changes.
Okay, so just to summarize for everyone, if there's an error on the envelope, ask the voter to correct it and to initial it, or if it's something significant, go ahead and spoil that envelope and complete a new envelope. Is that correct?
Right. If they've just totally messed it up, just start all over again. But if it's a simple mistake, go ahead and just scratch through it and write it, because I know everyone's busy and it takes so long and it's frustrating for the voter to, start all over again. So you use your best judgment. Just remember, someone is looking at this and they need to be able to register the voter. So they have to be able to read those numbers and read what has been written. They need to be able to understand the spelling, see what's written. So if you can't, and it's just a mess, just start over again.
Okay. And then one for Bushra, then I think Jean's got one final question as we wrap up here. Bushra, we saw a number of requests come in through the Q&A in the chat for a summary of those reminders you provided towards the end of the slides.
Okay.
Is that something that you would be able to draft up and we can send it out to all the election officers either by email or as a printed handout?
Definitely. Yes, sure.
Okay.
I will.
You have a lot of adoring fans, Bushra. I see a lot of people saying they really appreciate and enjoy the information you provided and your help on election day and before. Jean, I think you've got one final question for us.
I do. How do we handle a voter who's doing an SDR or provisional, but they are unable to complete that application themselves? They need some kind of help.
So they can request assistance. And if they cannot sign, and this is the only time that we accept application without signature, when there is a box. If Gretchen, can you show the application, please? So you see a box under the signature said that the voter with the physical disability and cannot sign. Only that time we accept those applications. And if somebody helped the voter, they need to write down their name and the signature.
And Bushra, if it's a provisional voter, provisional or SDR voter, do they also need to complete a request for assistance form like they would for a routine voter?
Correct.
Okay. And now I see Gretchen's got it up here on the screen, image of the envelope.
So you see on the application, beneath the signature, there is a box. If the voter cannot
under number 7,
sign,
right?
Correct.
Number 7 or number 6, depending on which side you're looking
yes. At. I'm looking at number 7. We are talking about the SDR.
Oh, right.
So number 7, under the signature, if the voter with the physical disability, that's correct. They can check that box. That's the only time we're accepting application without signature.
But to be clear, they always will need to do a request for assistance form if they need somebody to help them fill this out. And can it be the election officer, the SDR specialist, the chief, being the assistant for them?
Ravi, you can help with that. I don't know that.
Yes, as long as it's the same criteria for other requests for assistance issues. There's a handful of people that can't be the assistant, but other than that, the exceptions are written on the request for assistance form. Other than that, anyone can be the assistant. These are great questions that you all have submitted. And as we close out today, we want to encourage you to keep submitting any questions that you may have. If there's any part of this process that you are not sure about in any way, one, feel free to email us or call us now before Election Day, and we're more than happy to walk you through it. Or B, come to one of our open houses this week and speak with one of our trainers or other staff about these situations. Or C, call us on Election Day. Again, I keep saying it, I can't stress it enough. We would much rather help you on the phone than to have to review that situation after Election Day and not be able to provide a recommendation to the board to be able to counter provisional situation. Bushra and her team and Cheryl and her team, they go through all these thousands of provisionals after Election Day. It's not an easy process. I think last year we were using something like 80 people working long shifts to get everything done, to research all these situations adequately and provide the information we need to the electoral board. And I'm sure Bushra and Cheryl would both say they would much rather you call to figure it out. Is that right, Bushra?
Definitely. We are here starting 4:30 to the midnight.
So as we finish up here, Bushra or Cheryl, is there anything else you'd like to add for all of our SDR specialists, chiefs, and assistant chiefs? I know we've gone through a lot. It's hard to remember all this. So the key is simply follow the instructions in your manual or call us. But is there anything else?
I don't think so. We wish you the best of luck. We're behind you. You're the face of democracy in Fairfax County out there, and we're just here to support you. We want everything to go well. We don't want you to make any mistakes. So please just take it slowly, go through it. It's a lot, but it's a slow election. This is practice for November.
And June.
I did see someone ask how many provisionals might we expect this election. So we think on average, maybe 3 to 10 per precinct. Depends on the precinct. The larger precincts may have more than that. The smaller precincts may have fewer than that. But for November, this November's presidential election, if you can see Bushra's face there, we expect quite a few November. Right. So we want to make sure all of you feel very comfortable with these procedures. We are working on some updates on our end to try and make things a little bit easier. Nothing that we can share today, but we might be piloting something in some of your precincts. We'll reach out to some of you specifically about a tool that we might have to help some of you in this election, and hopefully some other things later this year that will make some parts of this process a little bit easier. With that, I really want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to all of our panelists, including Cheryl, Bushra, Gretchen, Sean, and Jean. We hope we've helped you get ready for the SDR process and voting in general for next week. I can't believe we're only a week away from the election.
No.
It's coming up on us. And again, feel free to reach out if you need any help. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone, and have a great election.
Thank you, everyone.